Hello and a very warm welcome to our viewers watching us live through television screens and our online social media online social media platforms, Facebook and YouTube. I'm Erin Imana, will be reading the news for you today. Stay tuned. Proceeding to the details. The deliberate and systematic destruction of health facilities in Tigray has led to the near collapse of Tigray's health system, while the ongoing siege has made it impossible for the system to revive in any meaningful way. Momona Health Center in Ma'ala has announced that it's no longer able to provide laboratory services for its patients, as the ongoing siege leads to the depletion of medical supplies. Abel Zagabu has more.
The ongoing humanitarian crisis in Tigray has been exacerbated by the deliberate and systematic destruction of medical facilities by Ethiopian forces and their allies from Eritrea. This is Momona Health Center in Ma'ala. Health professionals at the health facility say they have been forced to suspend laboratory service due to lack of essential supplies, while other equally vital services such as vaccination for children have been suspended for months due to the ongoing blockade.
It's been months since we stopped giving vaccinations to infants, but mothers and children come and sit here anyways, hoping to get vaccinated. Also, we don't have laboratory reagents or strips, and we don't have any medication for patients suffering from chronic illnesses. But they still come here, hoping to receive treatment. We measure their blood pressure, but there's little else we can do to help them.
There's a very little this hospital can still do effectively. We've suspended much of our services due to the blockade.
The discontinuation of services at the hospital has meant that patients in dire need of health care are going without, and many fear the lack of health care will lead to further complications.
My son is sick. He also aches and is developing a fever. I came here looking for medical treatment, but they say that they stopped providing services. I came here for laboratory tests, but they say they have discontinued these services. So me and my children will not be able to get any treatment.
Sultan Ainalem is the director of the health center, said that the facility has discontinued much of the services it provided to mothers and children.
A mother should take oxytocin right after she gives birth. We don't have that medicine now. She also has to take vitamins. We don't have that either. We have children that we're under strict follow-up that we can no longer treat and who are now in dire need of treatment. It's very sad that we cannot help many of them.
We call on the international community to help us. We need urgent assistance. We have heard enough rhetoric. We need action now.
People are dying every hour and minute, while the international community stands idly by. Our people are dying. There's nothing sad than seeing children dead due to lack of medicine.
Tigray Bureau of Health had announced earlier this week that IDA agents and essential chemicals invading Ethiopian forces and their Eritrean allies had destroyed over 18% of health facilities in Tigray, while the ongoing blockade on essential items such as medical supplies has made it impossible for Tigray's health system to revive.
The depletion of medical supplies in Tigray has had a devastating impact on vulnerable communities across the state. Our reporters were at Kanama Pharmacy, where the health professionals say that many patients are dying due to lack of medical supplies. Sablor Glama reports.
The 7-month-long all-encompassing siege on Tigray has brought a devastating impact on many patients with chronic illnesses, as they couldn't get the medications they need to survive. Pharmacists at Kanama Pharmacy in Ma'ala say that it's been long since they ran out of medical supplies and that the ongoing siege has made it impossible for them to give the proper services.
There are so many people who have become bedridden because they couldn't get medication. Some of the patients have swollen legs and some have swollen bodies, only because there is no medication available. So far, I have asked the whereabouts of some of the patients I knew, and 2 of them have died. There are many that chose to remain at home because there is no hope for medication.
Kanama Pharmacy used to help so many people in Tigray. There were many who used to come from Aksum, Shira, Adigrat, and Raya to get medication. Now there is no medical supply at all. We are not helping anyone. People with chronic illness are suffering greatly. There is no insulin at all. Nothing. The lack is everywhere. That's what we are telling our patients.
We're just talking about those with chronic illnesses, but when we look at patients who require emergency medications, many of them may have died. If this continues, it can all mean that they're all destined to die.
If a child doesn't get the insulin needed, he or she won't stay alive for more than 2 days. Because if the sugar level decreases, the insulin needs to be given through vein. Otherwise, it will be very difficult. The patients have gradually stopped coming here and they are in a grave danger.
The pharmacists added that this is an indication of cruel intentions towards the people of Tigray.
It is clear that this is an extension of their genocidal campaign. A child's sickness has nothing to do with politics. They want the entire people of Tigray, the old and the young, to suffer. This shows the extent of their cruelty.
This is being done intentionally. It is not just a coincidence. They mean to commit genocide on the people of Tigray.
A father of a patient we met at a pharmacy says that the siege has become very difficult for them and that there needs to be a solution.
We are under a blockade by the enemy. They have no reason other than their intention to commit genocide on the people of Tigray. There is no medication at all due to the siege. My son has a cancer and he used to get his medications here. But now, there is nothing here and I can't get him help.
The pharmacists also added that the international community should go beyond rhetorical condemnation and act now to save the lives of many.
The patients come in limp to ask for medication. They are in such a condition, and this sickens me and concerns me a lot. Therefore, the world should take measures to break the siege.
The world is just observing at how the people of Tigray are blocked 360 and does nothing about it. It's about time the international community goes beyond saying that they are concerned or worried and take action to help these patients.
As the chronic illness patients await to be rescued, so many of them have died in the process.
For 7 months now, aid groups have not been able to get humanitarian assistance to the millions in need. Now, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is calling for cessation of hostilities to allow unfettered access into Tigray. Salome Tigray has the details.
The Ethiopian government has imposed an all-encompassing siege on Tigray, blocking the entry of all essential goods, including humanitarian assistance, for over 7 months now. Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, has called for the immediate cessation of hostilities, saying the conflict has continued to hinder the entry of humanitarian assistance into Tigray. Guterres called on all parties to the conflict to end hostilities and play their part to improve humanitarian access to the millions in need of urgent humanitarian assistance and make way for an all-inclusive national dialogue.
The people of Ethiopia continue to suffer greatly from ongoing conflict and bloodshed. For millennia, the tradition of the Olympic truce has called on all parties everywhere to stop hostilities throughout the course of the Games. As I prepare to leave for the Winter Olympics, I make the strongest possible appeal for all parties in Ethiopia for an immediate cessation of hostilities. And this can allow for effective humanitarian access and relief to all affected populations throughout Ethiopia. And these actions will help pave the way to a much-needed inclusive national dialogue involving all Ethiopians.
The Secretariat also emphasized on the upcoming Olympics, saying the Games represent peace and harmony for all people.
I reiterate my appeal to all parties to follow the finest tradition of the Olympic spirit to save lives, overcome differences, and find the path to real peace.
The UN issued a report last week indicating that over 40% of people in Tigray are suffering from extreme lack of food, while 3/4 of the population are using extreme coping strategies to survive.
Before the start of the siege, Ma'ala Hospital had been providing medical treatments to more than 13,000 patients suffering from chronic illnesses. But the ongoing siege that has included a blockade on medical supplies has meant that medical supplies are running out and many patients are dying due to easily preventable diseases. Abraha Gauratansay has more.
As the blockade by the Ethiopian government tightens, Maqala Hospital has currently started to run out of stock for almost all types of drugs and medical equipment. The hospital reported that the 13,000 chronic patients and other tens of thousands of patients with acute illnesses have started to die out due to lack of medication.
Generally, HIV, TB, MDRT, mentally challenged patients, and other outpatients are all out of medication. Right now, our service provision has rolled down to zero level. For instance, diabetic patients are dying due to lack of medication. The same is happening to HIV patients. As you can see, there is no medical supply at all in here. Patients are suffering greatly, so we are in a critical condition, especially with insulin, which is unavailable in both forms, tablet and injection. We have started to use expired drugs out of desperation.
Belaine Stafera works as a coordinator for epilepsy patients and outpatients at Maqala Hospital. She says that she is psychologically traumatized for seeing patients die in dozens every day, and that there is nothing she can do about it.
I myself am psychologically disturbed, and this has started to affect my family as well. When everything is missing, you start to become desperate. Sometimes we bring sugar with us from home. If patients' insulin level declines sharply, we give them the sugar. Right now, so many things are missing from our hospital. Being a health officer has become meaningless in the absence of essential drugs and medical equipment.
Fisa Hagos, a mental health expert at Maqala Hospital, also says that health officers have become vulnerable to severe psychological trauma due to the shortage of medication and collateral complications.
Seeing people die due to shortage of medication is quite depressing. Health workers are now becoming desperate. They see no use checking into the hospital regularly, given that they can't help anyone as drug and medical equipment are totally unavailable. They feel that their presence is pointless.
The health officers at Maqala Hospital called on the international community to do everything within their power in making drugs accessible to the hundreds of thousands of patients whose lives depend on medication instead of the frequent rhetorical condemnations.
The UN usually says it's concerned and worried, but this cannot solve our patients' problems. We desperately need medicine to save lives. They are morally obliged to reach out for us and save our lives. We need them to help us now.
If this continues, millions of patients will perish before the blockade ended due to lack of medication. We are losing lives now, but the worst catastrophe is yet to come. The international community should come to our rescue as soon as possible.
Unless the international community sees to it to help these patients, it's inevitable that the death toll in Maqala Hospital will rise alarmingly.
The siege has depleted medical supplies across Tigray, devastating vulnerable communities such as especially internally displaced persons that are just in need of shelter and humanitarian assistance, but also medical care. Haile Gabru has more on this.
Over 2 million people in Tigray have been displaced from their homes due to the ongoing war that has continued for over a year now, claiming the lives of many. These internally displaced people, particularly those from Western Tigray, have been living in famine and without necessary supplies to survive for as long as the war. They say that they are in need of unlimited healthcare and humanitarian assistance.
We have no food, clothes, medical supplies, or shelter. We're in distress, and the world should look to our suffering. My daughter cries out for food every now and then. However, I cannot provide her with food. We are starving. We have never been given humanitarian aid for as long as our stay here. We've spent days without food and medication.
I'm in a desperate situation. They cook me some sort of unusual shrubs, that is if only they have the supplies. On top of this, I'm diabetic. I'm expected to take enough food on a daily basis. However, people here are at the verge of death due to lack of food and medication. There is no access to humanitarian aid following the deliberate siege imposed on Tigray. This is the darkest time we have ever had. We are still alive by the will of God. So many of us have died of hunger. There are many people who are suffering from chronic illnesses, chronic diseases in this particular camp. The Ethiopian government is pushing its own citizens to death. I can't begin to explain how bad it is, the situation we are in. We have nothing. Hunger and grief have swollen up every child's and mother's faces.
As you can see, my daughter is sick. There is a swell on her ear and she's bleeding out. I couldn't get money to get her treated properly. On top of this, there's lack of medication due to the all-encompassing blockade on Tigray.
Following the genocidal waged against the people of Tigray, millions of Tigrayans have run away from the diabolical atrocities committed against them, leaving their homes behind. The internally displaced people said that they were being helped by the residents of Maghala. However, now they themselves are in need of donation due to the all-encompassing siege. The IDPs further expressed that they are in distress due to lack of medical supplies.
I have a blood pressure. I'm also asthmatic. My left eye is not fully functional. It works a little when I press it like this. I'm also suffering from dysuria, a painful discharge of urine. Though I was told by doctors that the only solution for this is surgery, I can't afford the expenses. It's been 4 years now since I started taking insulin for my diabetes. However, healthcare centers in Tigray are running out of medical supplies due to the siege. A doctor have told me that I might get paralyzed by the time I stop taking the insulin. So I'm really depressed.
Me and my husband are taking antiretroviral therapy. However, the medicine is so hard to find. What depresses me most is who is going to look after my daughter if I die. It's devastating to think. If I'm lucky, though, I may get the medicine and stay a little longer for her.
The internally displaced people stated that they are in a devastating